All right. I
All right.
think I think we're good to go. Gabriel Cardona, thanks for agreeing to chat with me for an hour or so.
Always, man. It's a pleasure. It's great to talk to you. I was just thinking, like, the entire Bitcoin Cash journey has been such a rocket ride from day one, and I know you've been one of the original players from way back. I always give you credit for helping Bitbox to tip, so it's always nice to touch bases with you because we both have experienced so much in such a compressed time span. It's crazy.
Yeah, dude. I want to talk about what I've been seeing you get up to because I feel like you've evolved in a lot of ways in this very sort of interesting, but also like totally. I don't want to say predictable, but like it would be what I would expect because I remember even in our first conversation that we had when we met in Hong Kong, we you were
Mhm.
talking about your experience with the web, like getting deep into the standards and all of that, and now I am seeing this. It's really stuck out to me with the Badger Wallet stuff and at the same time I was working on some sort of like payment protocol, sort of like very transparent, moving around on web protocols and pushing money and moving money. And so, we said that we were going to sit down and have a conversation, and a lot I feel like even has happened since that time, since you were in Asia. Like I feel like there's been some
Mhm.
interesting things in development in that regard. And so like I know that you're probably like, well, what the hell are we going to talk about or whatever. But like I just wanted to sort of think out loud because I think one of the things that's missing, like I've been trying to do this year, is just I'll have thoughts, and sometimes I'll just assume that everybody else in the community is on the same wavelength, and I don't even need to start doing it, and I start like halfway into the story rather than
Mhm.
starting back with the sort of realizations that I had. You know what I'm saying? And so like
Sure.
yeah, so what I've been seeing is there's something going on right now, and it is this idea of Bitcoin, and I'm going to use Bitcoin like broadly here. So it's like I'm talking about Bitcoin BTC, Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, whatever, right? Like I'm talking because eventually I figure as we start to find things that work, as we're separated, we're going to have to integrate those things ourselves. So it's like, whether it's the Omni protocol being integrated from BTC and then coming over into BCH and becoming,
Mhm.
a wormhole, or whether it's Schnorr signatures, you know what I mean? Things like that. I have a feeling if Avalanche works, that, BSV will probably pick it up and some other things like that, right? So what I'm
Mhm.
seeing is there's some sort of connection where people are seeing like Bitcoin as becoming as ubiquitous as the internet, as ubiquitous as the web. But there's kind of like, I guess BSV is talking about it a lot with like the MetaNet stuff. And their whole idea is like, let's put the whole web on the blockchain, which I
Mhm.
really disagree. I think that's a terrible idea. But what I sort of saw with Badger Wallet, and you can flesh this out because I'm sure that you've been thinking of it. This has at least occurred to you, is that it's sort of like Bitcoin, particularly Bitcoin Cash, because you can do such low value transactions, like under what would be like under a cent. So you could do these microtransactions. Is like potentially adding a value layer to the existing web that is able to be accessed by web app developers in these what's going to start to feel like the native currency of the web. Does that make sense? I mean, is that
Mhm.
are you seeing that? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I so I think like one of the things that originally turned me on about Bitcoin. So you mentioned that whenever we met in Hong Kong, we discussed where I'm the first part of my career, and basically the backstory there is when I was in college, um, at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, I was studying web development tech there, and Google paid for me to be a member of the W3C HTML5 working group, and so I was involved in the standards body very early on. And so, I got involved with HTML5, and I'm an acknowledged contributor to that specification. And so that kind of set me on the journey that I'm on now, and it's why I'm a web developer, and primarily why Bitbox has been web tech, because I'm a web developer. But anyway, to sort of speak to your question, I believe it's somebody out there can Google this. It's either HTTP code 402 or 420. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there is an HTTP code which is payment required. And so, very early on in the very beginning of the web, Tim Berners-Lee and the people around him, when they were creating HTTP, they already knew at that point, like, it would be really nice if we could have a value layer on top of the web. Imagine if you could pay people for their content. So anytime you cruise to a web page, you pay them a fraction of a penny to read behind the paywall. Mm-hmm. All the stuff that Bitcoin has promised to do from day one. So, whatever that HTTP code is, 402 or 420, it's payment required. And I remember learning about that, in college and thinking, wow, that's interesting. So from early days, I don't know when that HTTP code was added, whenever HTTP 1.1 was created, presumably, but the people creating the infrastructure of the web knew that there needed to be a way to say payment required for this piece of web content. And so, Bitcoin, whenever it launched in 2000, and when I first heard about it, presumably, I think that was like 2011-ish. I don't remember the exact date, but it was relatively early. And that was one of the things that resonated with me. It's like, this could be the digital money of the web. So, I think the motivation behind Badger primarily was, I'm such a big fan of tokens. And I knew that as soon as we started getting tokens in our ecosystem, probably around the San Francisco and Amsterdam hackathons, there just started to be this whisper amongst the different developers, like, we need a MetaMask, we need a MetaMask. Mm-hmm. So that was really the sort of like the motivation behind Badger. I view it like this. This is sort of my marketing pitch on it. If you were using a version of Chrome from 2 or 3 years ago, you wouldn't experience the modern web. You really do need a modern web browser in order to experience the modern web. And I view Bitcoin Cash as having the potential to be as meaningful as the web and beyond. I really do believe that Bitcoin Cash, or Bitcoin, like you said, let's zoom out a little bit. Let's have a higher viewpoint. Bitcoin still lives on. In fact, it's healthier and more vibrant than ever, because we're witnessing this Cambrian explosion in the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. We get to see BTC try its thing with layer 2 solutions. We get to see the BSV people try their thing with the MetaNet. We get to see the Bitcoin Cash people focus on cash. And so, if you want to experience everything that Bitcoin Cash offers as a platform, you need a modern wallet. And so we approached Badger as, we are trying to go mainstream with this. We really do want to create a wallet that would be usable by anybody in the world, regardless of their gender, their age, their nationality, their language. It would be ultra intuitive, but at the same time, we want it to be extensible by developers, because we know that if you give creative people the tool sets they need to build amazing things, they'll continuously blow your mind. And that's the secret behind creating developer tools. Yeah. So that's kind of how we're approaching Badger.
I mean, the move to, also what I see in terms of the move to JavaScript. I mean, when I started developing on BTC in 2014, I'll be damned if there was a single JavaScript library out there to do anything. I mean, it was like
Python, I'm guessing, and C++, right?
It was C++ at the protocol level, and it was Python at the application level. Right. So,
for sure.
So that's like all of my chops, everything that's in my portfolio, and like my old little tricks of the trade, some of the stuff that got put into Cointext and whatnot is like, that's all Python, for the most part. But I'm realizing that, as I'm seeing this JavaScript explosion, that the speed at which new developers can get spun up, and then the fact that there's this cross-platform sharing, so it's like you've got guys who are developing for mobile apps who are writing in JavaScript, and then compiling it for multi-platform, and at the same time, then you've got that code being able to be used by web guys and vice versa, and it's just like it really takes it to this. I really feel like Bitcoin's becoming potentially something so different in the next couple of years, the perception of it, not perceived as like this kind of arcane thing that's, that the core devs are these high priests. and that it just exists with these QR codes in my mobile wallet. Or maybe I'm running a full node. That it's like, that it's really taking it down to the level of those people who are like prototyping fast, spinning up little apps, really experimenting, and I feel like that just it creates something totally new. And I know that you're seeing it because you're developing the tools. You've developed the tool set that in large part has enabled a lot of that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think you nailed it pretty much across the board. So yeah, I mean, JavaScript, it's the most popular development runtime in all of history. Everything ships with a browser. Everything's got a V8 on it or something like that. Even if it's an Android phone, it won't necessarily run Swift, but it's got a web browser. If it's an iOS device, it won't necessarily run in Kotlin, but I bet you it'll run a web app. JavaScript is ubiquitous. The web is ubiquitous. Maybe that's the way to say it. And JavaScript is the object-oriented language which bundles with the web. So if you go to create apps, you always are faced with this eternal struggle that everybody who's likely watching this has struggled with, and it is native or web. And if you go with native, you are likely to have access to lower level APIs, smoother animations, stuff that you just do not have access to in the web. So you have depth. But when you go with the web, you have breadth. You have ubiquity. Web is on everything. So, everything will ultimately run in a JavaScript environment because you have things like WebAssembly and you have things like MScript, which allow you to take things and port them from, transpile. It seems like I'm jumping on this side, so let me know if I'm breaking up. But you have things like MScript, which allow you to transpile C++ to run on JavaScript runtime. So people used to talk trash about JavaScript because it was created over the course of Brendan Eich, who is, the co-founder of Netscape Navigator and the co-founder of Brave and the Firefox. So, JavaScript notoriously was born very quickly in the heat of Silicon Valley kind of thing. It was awkwardly named JavaScript in some weird licensing deal with Sun Microsystems, and forevermore there will be confusion about the name Java and the name JavaScript. The standard is technically called ECMAScript. It's prototypal inheritance, not object-oriented inheritance. It's got got this as the keyword. It's got all these little quirks, but despite all of that, the ubiquity of the web is what won. And fortunately, the standards body ECMAScript is very alive, and it's very active, and JavaScript has matured tremendously in my career. In the 10 years I've been around, JavaScript has just gone through paradigm shift after paradigm shift. And because of the way JavaScript works and web browsers work and NPM and the whole ecosystem, you're able to polyfill all of this stuff from the future. So in a way which is, I think, unique to the web, you're able to kind of like make software from the past run more advanced APIs. It's very exciting. So, where I believe, like, I guess to the second part of your point there, the way we approach things on my team and, the culture I'm trying to introduce to Bitcoin.com, although it's already there, I know, when I say I'm trying to introduce it there, that's maybe a bit of an overshot, but the culture we're trying to cultivate at Bitcoin.com and the culture we definitely cultivate on my team, the developer services team, is to ship early and ship often, and to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. And, I live in part-time in San Francisco, part-time in Asia, in Tokyo and Hong Kong. I'm in San Francisco now. I've worked in Silicon Valley for many years before I got into the blockchain space. And, speed is your single greatest competitive advantage. It's really better than how much money you've had and how much brand you have. There are different assets you can quantify, but speed is really the greatest one. And that's why small startups have such an advantage over these huge companies. You see somebody like Google with 30,000 people and $1 trillion, and then you see a startup who moves so fast that Google will swoop in and buy them for $50 million just because they don't want to compete with them in 5 years, because they know that they started out as two dudes in a garage. Having built Bitbox myself out of my own bedroom and funding it myself, and caught the eye of Bitcoin.com and Roger, and having joined Bitcoin.com and having Bitbox just go to the next level, I can speak personally. Like, speed is your single greatest competitive advantage. Ship early and ship often. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. Just put something out there and own that mind share and get your brand out there and kind of own the space, because the pace of change is accelerating so quickly that if you can kind of and I know you know this really well because you're like a master of brand. Your personal brand is like top quality in my opinion. If you can sort of just own that mind space as a brand, like even
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have it all solved immediately, if you can sort of get people on board with you. So to kind of bring that into your final point, like Bitcoin went through a dark age. There's no question about it. The scaling debate, whether orchestrated by malicious people or simply just camps who diametrically were opposed, unable to come to a common viewpoint for whatever reason, Bitcoin went through a dark age and did not do what it should have done by now. So, for example, Satoshi launched the blockchain when 2008, 2009. That's when I basically started my career. I'm long-winded. I'll wrap it up and get your response very quick.
No. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, like if you think about it, Android, when iOS launched like 2007, 2008, my dates are foggy here, but it was around the same time. Let's say within 18 months of each other,
sure,
mobile and blockchain launched. And we're living during the singularity. We really are living during this time when information technologies touches something, it just starts growing in all these different dimensions by orders of magnitude, exponentially, basically. And you see that with mobile. You see that with data. 95% of the data that was ever created in all of history was created in the last 2 years. We create exabytes and exabytes of data every day that used to take from the beginning of history through the Roman times. We create that every single 18 hours or something. Every single day, there's about 2.5 million iOS and 2.5 million Android devices activated. Things went crazy, but the blockchain did not. And it really, really should have. Like if you zoom out and you're looking about paradigm shifts that are going to change the human condition, and we're going to talk about in 1,000 years, the blockchain is one of those. That's why I get up and work every day. That's the computer science is real. So, fortunately, Bitcoin is open source, and we were able to divorce and fork into Bitcoin Cash. And fortunately, Bitcoin SV was able to fork away. I think that was actually very, very healthy for our ecosystem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So it's sort of like Bitcoin is having a rebirth, and we're finally getting able to see all of the things that never happened. Scaling out the blocks, trying tokens, having privacy through Cash Shuffle, doing layer 2 solutions. To me, this is a renaissance. And having just left Hong Kong and Tokyo, and I know you got big ups in Hong Kong, which is a magical place. I was there for Blockchain Week. The tide has turned. The tide is rising again. The price is up, but even independent of the price, abstract that away. Just being on the ground, working where you and I do every day with developers in and out, there's no question that the vibe has changed. People are looking for the next big play. People are looking for the next big investment opportunity with their time and their money and their creative resources. It's on right now. We're getting ready to enter an entirely new phase, in my opinion.
It's also a very weird time, though. I think it's been very weird for me interacting with the sort of investor class and seeing how far behind they are, even though the people who are investing in crypto, God bless them, like the people who are really doing it, the family offices and the VC firms and whatnot who have dipped their toes in, like these guys have really gotten very educated, at least about, a segment of what's going on. But as you say, I think that a lot of that dark age also included the ICOs. It included all these other shiny things, right? That were really like distracting people away from like what I see now. That's so interesting is the things that people are becoming interested in. I like that you said it's a renaissance, and that word keeps coming up because it's like the things that 5 years ago the Mike Hearns and the Gavin Andreessens were interested in and were saying, this is what we need to add in. These are the things that we're coming back around to now. Yep. It's so crazy that like all of these shiny things out there, and then it's like going back to like, whoa, wait a minute. Like these were all of the things that were going to enable this sort of ubiquity that we're talking about. And it's like, I think it's hard for the investor class to really wrap their heads around the idea that something like, that the mass adoption wave could conceivably happen with something like Badger Wallet uptake and a WordPress plugin. You know what I mean? That the two of those together is all you need to be able to have like a massive global infrastructure using Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah, it's like we have this really unfortunate and awkward and historically unique situation where Bitcoin, the brand, is so damn good that the
Hmm.
entire movement is tied to that one brand. And
Right.
so, because that one brand is just dragging their feet, asking for 18 more months, as if we don't live during the pace of change accelerating. Kurzweil says in The Singularity is Near. I've given this quote 1,000 times, but it's really profound. If you internalize this, it will drive you daily. We will experience 20,000 years worth of paradigm shifts in our century when compared
Mm.
to the previous century from 1900 to 2000. So somebody who was born in 1900 died
Mm.
in 2000. Imagine what they saw, right? From the end of the industrial revolution through cars and electricity, both world wars, space travel, all the internet, mobile, everything. That's 100 years. We'll experience 20,000 years worth of paradigm shifts in our
Wow.
century because the pace of change is accelerating. And that's profound. That's deeply, deeply profound. So, not that I need to go on a lightning network tear, but just it's the combination of this ultra uber unawareness about the importance of the user experience. I mean, can we just be honest here and admit that the lightning user experience is an absolute nightmare
Right.
and that
Yeah.
it
Oh,
is
of course.
just so not mainstream? I mean, anybody who has any any brain at all to consider what do normal people do in their spending habits would look at the lightning network and say that's clearly not for mainstream usage.
Right.
Sure, if you
Right.
have 100,000 internet of things devices and you need to shuffle a single satoshi all around between them instantly, and pay no fees and never settle on the network, great use of the lightning network. But if you got to have $500 in a payment channel in order to get paid $500, that's a no-go.
Right.
Most people don't even
Yeah.
have $500. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
anyway, that's and so that type with this. Uh, Give us a couple more years, everybody. To me, is just like a clueless because I live and work in Silicon Valley, where I know there is always, and it's Silicon World now. It ain't just Silicon Valley. We're all connected. You don't live in Silicon Valley and you destroy it every day.
Right.
It's
Right.
Silicon World. There's a lot of hungry people out there who are not waiting 18 months. And so, yeah, anyway, I don't even know how I got on that particular tear about the Lightning Network. Yeah, but
I,
anyway, so I know where I was going. We were talking. You said Badger and Bitcoin Cash. So I call the Bitcoin Cash BCH Bitcoin fork the divorce, because it was different to me than the SV BCH fork. The Bitcoin Cash BCH BTC fork, like I saw that one coming years in advance.
mm-hmm.
Literally after Ethereum and Ethereum Classic forked, I was like, Bitcoin's going to fork. I know how it is. I think we had this exact same conversation previously,
Mm-hmm.
so I apologize. But like anybody knows, unhealthy relationships, the best thing to do is go your own ways. That's a relationship, business, everything. So it's clear to me Bitcoin was going to fork. Um, Unfortunately, in the divorce, they kept the name and the ticker, even though
Mm-hmm.
the vision and the heart of the technology came to the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. Because we didn't get the mining power right out of the gate, we didn't get the brand. And in this particular unique situation, it's like Ziploc bags or Kleenex or Kool-Aid. The brand
Right.
Bitcoin is
Right.
just tightly coupled to the technology that our biggest challenge, in my opinion, is not even engineering. It's not money. It's not smart people. It's brand. I think the single biggest challenge we face from the Bitcoin Cash camp is that we have an off-brand. We're not Pepsi.
Mm.
We're Pepsi Light or something like that, and that matters.
Mm-hmm.
That really does matter in the terms of mainstream, super, mega, ultra adoption. So I'm interested to know your thoughts on that about the branding.
No, yeah, yeah. It's so weird that you say that. I just had a conversation yesterday with Marco Perebohm from from Decred, the guy who was one of the two guys who coded up and created Decred. And
Nice.
I had put together a little U.S. and Canadian Decred numbers, sort of stealth for him, just for him to play around with, and he was blown away by it. And I was actually blown away as he was sharing it around to people. And what I was blown away by was the fact that he was sharing it around to these people. They were loving it, using it with Decred, which basically the UX, because the price is relatively low, so the fees are very, very low, even though they have 100 Satoshi per byte minimum minor fee or whatever, but it's like $16 a Decred. So like he was showing it around, and I asked him, I was like, has did the people you were sharing it with, had they heard of Cointext before? Had they used it before? And he was like, what's crazy is like none of them had used it. And he was like, to be honest with you, it was just because of the association with Bitcoin Cash. They were like, oh, that's a Bitcoin Cash project. And I was like, well, dude, we support BTC in US and Canada too. And he's like, oh, no, I didn't even realize that. But they were more than happy to like use it with Decred. Even though, truth be told, it's like it took more work for me to put together the Decred thing. They use, they use this Blake hash algorithm as opposed to SHA-256, and it's just like, there's more work involved rather than, oh, this is Bitcoin, I can use all the things for Bitcoin on it, and it's that sort of ubiquity. But no, I think you're right. We have a brand challenge, I think, but what I will say is that it's clear to me that like when you look at the landscape of developers working on any particular coin, you basically have Ethereum and you have BCH. But the difference with Ethereum and BCH is most of the Ethereum developers are not working on Ethereum, like moving around ETH. Most of them are in the ERC20 token space or doing some sort of smart contracts or this or that or the other. Whereas that's like shifted in the other direction when you're looking at BCH. There's a ton of developers doing a ton of development, stuff released all the time, people collaborating, people sharing, and then there's tokens and people doing that, and that's just starting to pick up. But like when people are the developers, I don't want to say the thought leaders, but certainly even from an academic standpoint, like the amount of mind share that's devoted to BCH, like it's even more than BTC because there's almost no mind share being devoted to BTC. It's this little cabal and nobody else is allowed to think about anything. They're just allowed to like follow along with whatever those guys tell them they should do. Nobody's allowed to think about anything.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I understand the essence of why Bitcoin Cash was called Bitcoin Cash because, it speaks to the heart of the Bcash pejorative. So Bcash means nothing to me in the same way Bitcoin means nothing, but the intention behind the word is to rob Bitcoin Cash of its pedigree. And Bitcoin Cash are both completely valid forks of the Bitcoin lineage. If you had UTXO from day one, you have an equal share of all of the above, right? So it's kind of like if you're playing kind of the Andreas Brecken, Daniel, I'll space his last name,
Krawitz
game. Yeah, Krawitz game. You're playing all Bitcoin, right? You're playing Bitcoin at a high level.
Right. Exactly.
And so it's sort of like it's only this weird tribalism. And I don't like to go too far down the rabbit hole because I'm a professional and I don't like to appear like too crazy. But I believe so much of it's manufactured, man. Like I really do.
Oh, I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've even talked about this on Twitter about those new. So I'll unpack this a little bit. I suspect you already know where I'm headed with this thought. But so I believe that a lot of the hatred or the weird branding issues that Bitcoin Cash suffers are manufactured. And because I really do believe that Bitcoin is so profound and transformative, and it was going to change the world in some outrageous way, in the same way mobile has changed the world. If you were talking about mobile 10 or 15 years ago, it would seem like sci-fi tech. Today, every single person in the room has 12 computers. Crypto and Bitcoin really were supposed to do that. Like today, when I travel and I go to Beijing, and I pay with every single thing from my cab to my room to my food to my everything with my WeChat. And then when I zip on over to Hong Kong and I pay for every single thing there with my Octopus card, and then I zip on over to Tokyo and I pay with every single thing there with my Pasmo card, I just think, shit, man, we should have been paying with everything with Bitcoin. This should have been the one Bitcoin everywhere, and it didn't pop. It just didn't do what it should have done. And it's very, very, very unfortunate. So, Anyway, so yeah, I just kind of, again, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there and forgot exactly where I was going with the question that you left off on. But yeah, to me, it seems like the thing about Bitcoin Core that always turned me off was that they discouraged innovation. It seems like they didn't want you to use the chain, and that's considered spam. We don't want you to write to op return. Let's cut it in half. We don't. You shouldn't use op multiplication and division. You don't need those in script. Let's just go ahead and turn those off. It felt very condescending, and like they didn't want to encourage innovation. And of course, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do in Bitcoin Cash, right? So it's like we do every single thing what we can to encourage innovation. And so I was unpacking that while we were talking about manufactured. So something that we all need to develop an intuition around, and hopefully we develop technological systems or social customs or conventions that help us deal with this is it's tools by random people on social media. So something that Ben and I previously talked about was there's this convergence of new technologies that are happening. One of them is the AI Foundation, which Elon Musk is one of the co-founders of, recently created like a language processing API that basically is able to just write this incredibly high quality content in the paragraphs. So they told it something like incredibly generic, like unicorns were found in this valley in the Andes. Why? And it wrote this entire news article about how these one horses got separated from their tribe 1,000 years ago, and they evolved this horn to pick these berries. And this whole thing, this AI spit this out, and it's like
Whoa.
really quality writing, yeah. And so that is, it's so high quality that they didn't release the open source engine. They were going to release it, like Google has that open source engine called Parsing McParseface, and
Yeah.
OpenAI was going to release it, and they decided not to because they're like it can be used maliciously. So that's one part of the thing that's happening. The other part is now you've got these deep learning systems which can basically spit out pictures of people's faces that are completely not real.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. That's super disturbing to me, that one.
and then then it goes in one step even farther. I'm sure you've seen this. Steve Buscemi's face mapped to this lady who's accepting an Oscar award. Did you see that one?
No.
So basically,
That's
so it's
weird.
a combination of text and pictures and then audio or video. So basically, they're able to take Steve Buscemi's face and map it to this lady accepting an award. So anyway, the reason I mentioned about all that is it's going to be really easy to manufacture dissent. So Clay Shirky,
Hmm.
who's like one of the great thinkers, wrote that book, Here Comes Everybody, and that was before social
Mm-hmm.
media. And it was basically saying like everybody in the world is about to have a supercomputer in their pocket, which has HD video and audio with ubiquitous high-speed bandwidth and their own blog, and everybody in the
Right.
world is going to get to tell their story, and that's going to be transformative. And sure enough, it has been. And so now it's really easy to get to have your personal opinion manufactured by following social media streams. It's real easy to go online and have 1,000 people send you a text saying "Be trash, be cash sucks, be crash," and then to walk away from it being like, "Yeah, be cash sucks," simply because you
Right.
just had 1,000 people tell you that. And so we need to somehow develop an intuition, or we need to develop systems. I don't know how we'll prevent people from being sibyled out of existence, but it's something as a human species we need to develop an intuition around.
Yeah, I mean, I've been talking and writing a lot about this concept. Like, I think it's so important that we're starting to see. I think we saw it this week with, like, all this news about, they're like, don't share that video, that you really want to see. Don't share it. Don't look at it. You're going to jail. And it's just like, dude, authority, you're gone. Like, you can't, the ability to enforce is going to be gone. And so the only thing you can do is just Sybil attack the world, right? We're going to have all these identities all spun up. And I think that that's yet again another place where Bitcoin can potentially shine, and it's something about that. It's a place where the tokens definitely come into the idea of reputation, the idea of a history of things happening, and being able to validate that this is a real individual who's had these real interactions. I can totally see that is going to be like our very good protection, that the fact that I'm holding this token and there's this Merkle tree of activity, underneath it, that anybody can query, and I can sign a message, with my private key of the address that's holding this token. Like all of these things, that's going to be the only way that we can protect ourselves from these sort of Sybil attacks. Really, that I can think of.
And that's the promise to me of Cash ID and cash accounts. Even if those technologies don't ultimately flower into what you're describing, I too think we're at the beginning of some type of paradigm shift that puts people in control of their data. Because, like right now, Google and Facebook know more about me than I probably know about myself. And by that, I mean, they've got apps on my phone that are tracking me everywhere I go. They've got geolocation on all my pictures. They know all my private messages. They know who liked what, when, and where. They can then have really smart computer scientists with deep learning algorithms and crazy supercomputers combing through that all the time, creating some type of shadow profile of myself and what ads I would buy, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very, very deep. And that's fine. That's their business model. So the more power to them if I'm willingly giving them my data. But we need a paradigm shift. So in the same way, Bitcoin came along at the exact right time. It was the right idea for the right time. Literally, Chancellor on the brink of bailouts. Right during the so-called financial crisis, he comes along and says, we have technology that could empower people to have their own money. Let's just do that. Let's set that off. And that was just the right idea at the right time. Identity to me is the next big paradigm shift. And, what that will take the form of, I'm not sure, but I definitely think you touched on it. A big part of it has to do with crypto keys, because you can prove digitally that unique. You can verify the existence of a document. You can sign a message and prove your identity, things which are just so incredibly powerful. So something I've always thought would take off, and it just hasn't yet, but technologies come at the right time. They flower when they are meant to, is the web of trust. I don't know how familiar you are with it.
Real
quick.
Absolutely.
So like, imagine this scenario to anybody out there who doesn't know what's happening. I'm in Hong Kong and I want to buy $100,000 worth of cash, Hong Kong cash with Bitcoin Cash, let's say. But I want to do it over the counter. I don't want to do it on exchange. I want to do this completely just at a tea shop. How do I do it? Right. Okay. Well, I call my dude Vin. Vin knows everybody in Hong Kong. He can connect me with the person. Well, how do I know whether or not I trust that person? I trust him most likely because Vin introduced me, and I definitely trust Vin. So it's kind of by this reputation, by association, I would trust this person indirectly. Well, there's this whole thing called the web of trust, and it's huge. The only place I've ever even seen it in practical use is on Bitcoin over-the-counter markets. I presume it's used in
local Bitcoins. It's been used for a long time. Yeah.
So basically, you can go on there and you sign. You submit your public key to this big database, the web of trust, and then you can go on and start giving everybody who's in this big database like a number. If I remember it, you can give a number 0, like -10, +10, or something like that. Like, I really don't trust this person I trust this person with my life. And then when you go to connect with somebody else in the web of trust, it will quantify some path between yourself to Vin, to that dude. And somehow all the different ranks of trust, it'll then give you a number, and it'll say, you trust this person a 7. And you can say, okay, well, that's actually pretty high. I'll meet this person. So I've thought a web of trust, I really think our digital and the physical world are combining in a way that's they're colliding in a way which is really unique, and it's almost like some archetypes are going to be born out of this. Neo maybe is the closest one we have in our culture, but it's very, very deep. I mean, we're living in this weird time where we're in the past, the present, and the future all simultaneously, and time is expanding and compressing. I mean, it's just it's going crazy, and I know you feel it yourself, right? So part of what we're doing, we're developing the tools that allow you to own your digital identity, because as atoms become bits, intellectual property matters so much. And that was really the great wisdom of Richard Stallman. He was way ahead of the game, and then Linus following up. But Richard Stallman got it super early on. He was at MIT. He was fixing printers or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but one day they would no longer let him have the source code to it. And he just had some deep revelation like, oh my God, when everything is digital, we got to have the right IP in place. And boom, that's when the GNU public license and all that stuff was born.
Yes.
So, that's why every single thing I do at Bitcoin.com is open source under the MIT license. That was like one of the most important things for me when I joined the company, because that's part of the revolution, right? Satoshi didn't charge, he gave it away.
Right.
Tim Berners-Lee didn't charge, he gave it away.
Right.
It's this shift in paradigm from the old school thinking where all the value is in the intellectual property. So if I can come up with something and I can patent it, I can become a billionaire. to the new
Mm-hmm.
thinking where all of the value is in the network. If I just give everything away for free and have people build on it, then we can
Mm-hmm.
create a network that's worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. So,
Mm-hmm.
we think that we want to help develop the tools both with Badger and Bitcoin Cash and Cash ID and cash accounts that allow you to own your identity in this new digital paradigm. And I think you're right. So what I imagine is like, imagine I own all of my data because, we live in crazy big data land.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do creates a digital footprint from all day long. So imagine instead of me giving my data to Verizon and Wells Fargo and Facebook and Google and everybody else, somehow I'm siloing it all myself in my own personal cloud. It's all encrypted by some biometric that some two-factor auth, but part of that two-factor auth is a biometric of my body, something like my my whatever, it doesn't matter, something on your body, your DNA, your eye, your finger print, something. And then I encrypt all my data, and similar to the web of trust, where I can say I trust Vin a lot, I don't trust this other person at all, and I can quantify it. We could have like concentric circles of our data, and I could say, I trust Vin a lot. He always has access to my stuff. I don't trust this person at all. They can only
Mm-hmm.
access level. Some type of paradigm shift that flips it to where you own all of your identity and it's backed up by these private keys because the technology exists. Now it's, but anyway, so I feel like once something like that is ubiquitous, we can have something like this web of trust idea. And that because social networks are ubiquitous, it's something like Facebook could implement web of trust without ever even telling people that they could create a web of trust based on their own deep learning. You wouldn't even need to quantify how much you trust your different people. And that could help against Sybils. That was my long-winded way of saying it seems like once we have ubiquitous digital identity, we can create a web of trust that will prevent or at least help fight against the endless Sybil attack, which we're going to face now that it costs nothing to spin up a new identity.
Well, and this is where I think you may have just described, for better or worse, what the next cultural global conflict is going to look like, because states have a vested interest in maintaining the networks that allow them to Sybil attack, because that's the best and cheapest way to. They already do it. I mean, it's propaganda, right? So, like, this is the new propaganda is going to require Sybil attacks. I mean, the Russian bots. Come on, like this is something that states, large corporations, the major media. I just had a conversation on Friday with Dave Butler about the fact that these blue with Pete Raymond, Mance Raider, about the fact that I look at these like blue check marks and I see that they're nothing but journalists working for establishment media, and I'm like, oh, that's the media doing Sybil attacks. Like, instead of spinning up like fake people, it's like, instead of them, because they know, well, everything's flattened out. The New York Times has one Twitter account, just like I have one Twitter account, but they've got 1,000 bots, because every single from the managing editor down to the fucking intern has a blue check mark next to their name. Even if they've got 50 followers, they got blue check marks, and they're just parroting whatever the New York Times says, And so, like, the establishment needs to have that. But those of us who are just wanting to live our lives, I feel like that's sort of like, as I call it, the crypto savage. But it's like, I do feel like that's a whole other culture, and that it's going to move from out of the. It has the potential now, I think, with, and this is what this is about the ubiquity of both the development and sort of the technology itself, the layers, the understanding, and having that value layer, that I have a feeling that people are just going to start building these things into their products because the libraries are there. And it will just be something built into the product. It won't even be that individuals really are asking for it, that there's a demand necessarily, but that it will be easy enough to just build it into the product. And over time, you're going to have these two divergent online cultures. The one who's like, yes, I'll deal with it, and the one that doesn't. I mean, to a degree we have that. People are siloing and doing all of that. But what you're describing, I think you're absolutely right, that you could potentially even have a public network where your ability to determine who you were dealing with was just so much better.
Yeah, I think the big roadblock, you touched on it there, is how are governments going to react as individuals continue to get asymmetrically empowered. And I often say that, to me, I perceive the story of the singularity as being the story of the individual becoming asymmetrically empowered against the state. And what I
Mm,
kind of mean there is, if you sort of roll back the timeline of humans to the very beginning, we obviously evolved, and we were very tribal in nature for a long time. And then, really, I also often say that the story of technology is the story of the human experience. And what I mean by that is, what's the difference between your lifetime and your grandpa's lifetime and his grandpa's lifetime? The human condition has been the same for 100,000 years.
yes, yes.
What's different between all? We all have the same hierarchy of needs. What's different between my lifetime and Shakespeare's lifetime? Well, the technology around us. And so the
Hmm.
technology is really the story of the human experience. And as you sort of roll the timeline forward from the time we were in tribes to today, technology has allowed individuals to just become more and more and more empowered. And you see it from evolving from when there were like serfs, and then into the Industrial Revolution, and into the last century until today, where really you don't even need to be part of a tribe. Sure, you still have the
Mm,
need to be social. We all interact in social ways online, and it's shown that if you lock people in a cell for weeks and weeks, they break down mentally. So obviously, biologically, we still need to be social, and we still need to be part of a tribe. But in the context of working online and making money and buying food and most of the hierarchy of needs, you can do completely by yourself now. Really, you don't even need to be a part of a tribe, because society has evolved to the place where we have enough medicine and electricity and food and houses and cars, and if you have money, basically you can just cut yourself off. And so when you layer that on top of how powerful people become when they become super users. And of course, I work
hmm.
in software, so I think of software super users, but it's not just software super users. Think of the most powerful chemist in the world, or the most powerful
Sure,
mathematician in the world.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, these days you're just asymmetrically empowered. And the group I always use is, there's a couple, anonymous, the group of hackers. So
Hmm.
just one or two people are just able to do an insane amount of good or bad, depending on how you view those people and their efforts. But it only takes one or two people to be able to crack into some of the biggest systems in the world. And then also with crypto, think about the fortunes people have generated in crypto so quickly, compared to
Right,
what it used to take our grandparents to make $1 million, compared to some of the
right.
overnight fortunes made in crypto space. So to me, the story of the singularity is the story of the individual becoming asymmetrically empowered against the state. And we're now reaching this point where we're going to have genuine life extension. So by 2035, we'll have genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics. We'll be able to turn on and off our genes. We'll be able to swallow pills which dissolve into nanobots, which go around our brain or allow us to sit underwater for 10 hours. We'll have exoskeletons which
Mm,
allow us to lift weights. We'll be able to scan our brain and upload our minds to machines. We'll be able to download information into our brain 1,000 times faster. We'll be able to cure disease. These We'll have genuine life extension. We'll be able to 3D print our organs. All these things are
hmm.
so
Hmm.
disruptive. They're so incredibly disruptive that you've got to wonder where the worlds collide, right? So you have this one world where you have this techno utopia where the singularity is basically empowering all these individuals, and then you have the real world. You have the
Right,
world as it actually
right,
is.
right.
Like, how do they actually sort of collide? Because we are in fact living in the singularity, but we also do in fact live in the real world. So how does this play out?
I mean, I think the question becomes which of the two branches. I really do see the sort of crypto fiat divide as being the divide that you're talking. I don't know which one ends up with the life extension and which one is back in the real world. I have a feeling that it's probably not fiat that ends up with the life extension, because I think it's only going to take probably one or two massively disruptive, like Google level things happening in the world of crypto, and that it's coming. Like
That's
Crypto's Google has not appeared yet, but it's coming very very soon, because the critical mass of people thinking about the problems is coming. It's here. It's approaching. I can very much feel it, and it's only, in my mind, it's only going to take that Google for literally everything to change, because I think at that point you just can't. It's like you can't put the genie back in the bottle at that point. Like the entire landscape, for people to be able to have like a native, for the internet denizen, which is what we all have become. And like I know you have kids, I have kids. Like I look at them and I understand that they are, their identity, their reality is completely tied, and it cannot be separated away from their internet reality, as their interconnectivity with the rest of humanity. And to be able to add a native value layer on top of that really gives them the opportunity to not have to deal with the state if they don't want to not have to deal with the establishment if they don't want to. And then how draconian, how authoritarian does the state have to become against that generation, when that generation is just like, there's not, you know what I mean? Because you can't threaten me with taking my money away, because you just can't do it. You know, the only thing you can threaten me with is bodily harm at this point. And like, I feel that we are approaching that phase. I feel like we're seeing things like when they're talking about, we'll put you in jail for 10 years if you have a copy in New Zealand, if you have a copy of this video of this shooting. Like, I really do feel like, oh, that's that. Like, that's what I'm seeing. Like, I'm seeing this response. But I do think that that's why, for me, as a father, more than anything, it's like I want to move so fast on getting this value layer there, because I feel like that is maybe going to be the only thing that's going to allow certain people to even be able to survive in an environment where the authoritarian state is coming down on them because of this shift.
Sure. And I mean, that is really the promise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. It's that it would be a world with money which is greater than any single country, and which is not backed by guns, which is instead backed by computer science and mathematics. So in the same way that the web democratized money, and if 20 years ago you told everybody, like in 20 years everybody will have a smartphone and they'll be able to post their own thoughts, people wouldn't believe you. They wouldn't believe you would have a smartphone, supercomputer in your pocket. They wouldn't believe there would be ubiquitous high-speed networks. They wouldn't believe, why would you even need WordPress? We've already got the New York Times. Why does everybody need to tell their own story? But we obviously know why. And so it's the same thing with money. Money is critical to the human condition, and money is gamed. Think about how many people's lives, how many people didn't get to live the fulfillment of their dreams because they had to make money, or they had to do something to try and economic ball forward, which is just clearly not sustainable. So, the world we're moving into is one of biomimicry. And I believe we're very close. We're within our lifetime, within 25 to 50 years, if we do our jobs right, and if everybody around the world works hard and does what we have the opportunity to do, I believe we will have biomimicry. So I really, I believe the arc of history bends towards justice, and I am a techno-utopian. I believe that we have tools at our disposal which are unlike any time in history, obviously, and we're trying to wrap our minds around them. And as we do, we'll solve problems, and we'll solve them at scale and at velocity. And so I think within 25 to 50 years, we'll be able to populate Mars. So we'll have a backup of our society, and we'll be able to have technology which brings nature into balance. And I know that whether or not nature is out of balance is a hotly discussed topic. So we don't need to go down. But from my perspective, like, we could do better with our technology. Our technology could mimic nature. Our cities could be very green. We have too much waste. We have too many people who die every day of hunger. Our society could be much, 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 much better. And we will. I really do believe we will. So really, the thing I wonder about is similar to my question about where does the police state collide with the singularity. Part of the singularity is that we as humans will have these godlike powers. So, if we are able to extend our lives and live to be 1,000 years old and live young to be 1,000 years old, what does that mean for the human condition? What does that mean for the people who come after us? What if we edit our genes and we pass on those genes to future generations? How will they feel about it? Like, all of a sudden we have an entire different can of worms we need to wrestle with. And my question is, how will we, sort of like the singularity, as you become asymmetrically empowered, you have these godlike abilities, and you really have to be you have to be, your personal accountability has to be flawless, basically, because at any
Mm,
point you step off the middle of the path, you can go either direction. You know what I'm saying? So you got to stay right on that
hmm.
middle path. I don't know, as humans, how we're going to do that. Like, how are we going to all sort of evolve and transcend in one moment together? I'm not sure how that looks, man. I don't know.
I mean, well, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And we have proven as a species that we rarely learn on the first go. So it certainly there is definitely that trade off there. Um, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question, but I think it's a good question. I think it's a good place to leave it off on that question. Something for people to think about. Dude, thank you for having this conversation. I hope that we can do it again. Like I really do. I do think it's valuable to just sort of, for those of us who are like in the trenches, to just think in public sometimes. And I think that people really do value it, even though I know that most of us are a little bit reclusive and we talk with each other, and we do share things and we have interesting conversations. But like, I really appreciate you doing this and sort of like thinking in public with me, man.
Yeah, man. Anytime. That it's an honor. And like I said, this entire Bitcoin Cash journey has been like a rocket ship ride for me. And I know you've been there from day one. And I know I
Yeah.
still will eternally be grateful for you for helping turn on the world to Bitbox. So thank you for everything. And anytime you want to chat, let me know.
Hey, man, it's been great. All right, well, I'll catch up with you soon. Talk to you later.
Cheers.